Welcome back to the Sportsbruiserz Podcast, episode 4. It has been a little over a month since episode 3. I caught up with doing other things, we are now back. And it's going to be a little bit of a smaller one with the topics. It's really me talking about just week 1 of college football, finally back, and a lot of big things in there. Certainly a lot of big upsets, no doubt. And there's really just going to be 2. And it's essentially it is one, but breaking out in 2. One talking about, of course, Arch Manning and his debut being the starting quarterback now for the Texas Longhorns, as well as just the rest of week 1, more so talking about the bigger upsets like Alabama and talking about the Miami game, Notre Dame, and so forth, and other games as well, and a little bit maybe too about Colorado as well. So starting off with Archie Manning, again, it was debut being the starting quarterback after Quinn Ewers went to the NFL draft, being drafted by, of course, the Miami Dolphins. Now it is the Arch Manning era. Everyone's hyping him up. Everyone thinks he's the Heisman favorite. First overall pick, whether it's this year's draft or next year, tons of praise for Manning, and it was certainly a disappointing start to that with Texas taking on number 3 Ohio State at noon, which should be already a precursor of how bad the game was going to be. For whatever reason, why they made it a noon kickoff instead of a night game, and it was pretty boring overall. 14-7, yes, that was the score, 14-7 in that game, and Arch Manning was abysmal in that one, to say the least. He went 17 of 30, or a 56.7 completion percentage, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, a 108.6 passer rating, and especially towards the end of the game, had plenty of opportunities to tie the game, take the lead, and so forth, missing throws, having throws behind the receiver, and just making costly decision-making. One was towards the end of the game with the taking a shot at the end zone, wide receiver drops it, so this is not essentially on Manning, but there was someone else wide open for the first down to try and convert the chains and put yourself in a better position to tie the game at least. But again, not a good start to Arch Manning, and there's already a ton of criticism as the game was going throughout and after the game, no doubt, especially on Twitter, people bashing Arch Manning and really coming down to the question of is he overrated? Was he overhyped? And now, again, it is just one game. Of course, there's still plenty of time left. If this year, or if he opts to come back next year, he still has all of next year as well to prove himself. So again, I know it is one game. It is week 1. Technically, the preseason, because we haven't had any action yet, unlike the NFL where they have some games that kind of ramp up into that. But boy, was it a bad game for the first one, especially on top of that 2 against Ohio State. And I don't think it's necessarily the loss to Ohio State, it's just how it was, how it came to be, especially the final score. I did predict, I gave my prediction, I should say, of the game, how it was going to be. I did pick Ohio State to beat Texas in that one, but I had certainly a much higher scoring game, 31-28. And if it did go out that way, or at least around the score of like that, I don't think people would be bashing Arch Manning as much, because you look at that and go, hey, they lost, but it was high scoring. Arch Manning, I'm sure, definitely would ball out in that one. But the fact that it was only 14-7 and the defense held Ohio State, which they had their own new starting quarterback as well with Will Howard, also going to the NFL draft with Julian Sayin being the starting quarterback this year. Not too impressive as well, but certainly made more plays to win the game as well. He went 13-20, 65% completion percentage, 126 for passing yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. So not that much impressive, but key stat there, didn't have a turnover in that one. But it's still, the fact is that Texas had, certainly, you saw it. They held Ohio State, the defending national champs, to 14 points. There is no reason why you can't win that game. Absolutely no reason whatsoever. And again, that is where I think more of the criticism comes in for Arch Manning. Is not that he lost, it's just how low scoring it was. And again, just failing to capitalize to do anything in the game whatsoever. Now, I didn't watch most of the game. I was out doing other things. I watched towards the end, really the fourth quarter. And it really seemed like that was pretty much you had to watch, was that. I watched I watched the touchdown, Ohio State's first touchdown to take the finally score in the game, and then the rest of the fourth quarter. So I really saw most of the important parts, but it was boring overall. Again, very lackluster, especially for a game that you could arguably say it was already on the calendar. We'll see with the rankings and how it plays out throughout the whole year, but the biggest game of the year. And again, I don't know why it was a noon kickoff game, and maybe looking at it now, it probably was better to have that instead of the night game. But again, it's for Arch Manning, that's where I think most of the criticism comes from, is just failing to convert on the opportunities when it was given. And also to outside noise as well that Arch Manning can't control, with no doubt high praise from a lot of people, overhyped, overrated, if you want to call it that. I don't think it's necessarily the overrated part. I think certainly we overhyped them a tad bit. I think we got a little too crazy because of just more so the last name Manning on the back of the jersey. If you replace it with something else, we wouldn't view him, as any different, or we would view him as much as we do now with that. So certainly the last name carries some weight to the hype and everything else. But again, again, it's only one game. I don't want to bash him and say he's a bust. He's a fluke. He's not going to pan out. But it was a brutal loss, no doubt about that, to lose to Ohio State. They had plenty of opportunity, of course, to bounce back, make the playoff, and so forth with the expanded expansion at 12 teams. So there is no worry about them missing the playoffs like previous times with only 4 teams. But again, it's a very brutal loss for Texas, especially for Arch Manning. Look at the remaining schedule. Gets easier, much easier for the next game. San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston. So you have a good stretch of those next 3 games to try and build up rapport, build up confidence and chemistry until you get to the next stretch here, which, of course, the rankings are going to change at this point on October 4th. But right now you have number 15 Florida. Then after that you have number 18 Oklahoma, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, number 5 Georgia, Arkansas, and then wrap up the season with number 19 Texas A&M. So they really have to build something together for these next 3 games, which are easy to say the least, no doubt about that. So Texas will be entering Florida 3-1. If not, there's going to be huge discussions about not just Arch Manning, but the whole program in general. But going to that, presumably should be 3-1, and that's where we're really going to see the next battle, the next test for Arch Manning. Did he bounce back from Ohio State, against Florida, against Oklahoma, and then it's going through the gauntlet really of the SEC in that one? There really is no easy game like the next 3 games, no doubt. Maybe the easiest one is, I don't know, Vanderbilt, but even that, I think it's that's not even necessarily a gimme. So again, it's gonna be very interesting to see how Arch Manning really plays out in the SEC. If this is his only year being the starting quarterback, I know there's a lot of back and forth again. If he'll opt into the upcoming draft or wait until the year after, who knows what the final decision is going to be. But no doubt for, again, to prove people wrong, prove people that it's not if you'll compare it to Shedeur Sanders, where his last name was kind of carrying him out too. Not saying he was a bad quarterback at all, but certainly the last name played a part there, that trying to live up to the Manning name in that one. I do think he'll bounce back in looking far ahead in October 4th against Florida. I do think, again, I think we kind of overhyped them. I think we got a little too ahead of ourselves because of the last name, because of just the high praise. It kind of similar to being an Oklahoma fan. Again, maybe not the same regard because of Manning and the praise that comes with him, or the stature. But Spencer Rattler was certainly a guy that was highly raved, highly praised going into his his full year starting. He was going to be looking at the future draft, NFL first overall pick, Heisman candidate, or Heisman. Kind of for your names, kind of blanked out. Lead candidate, or projected to win the Heisman. Sorry, there you go. I don't know why I had a blank there, but projected to win the Heisman, first overall pick. A lot of praise on there, and he just never lived up to that. Now being a starting quarterback in the NFL with the Saints, but again, just never lived up to what the expectations were. And I think we're doing this with not just Arch Manning, but I think there's a lot of quarterbacks too that we do this with. Putting too much praise on them really too quickly. And I get we got a little excited compared to last year with the limited action he did get in some games, and we got a little excited, a little ahead of ourselves, which is natural, of course. But again, I do expect Arch Manning to kind of get into a rhythm, and then I can't wait to see him against Florida. I think that's where he'll bounce back. I think he'll show you the shades of what we were expecting to see from Arch Manning. But again, I think we got a little too ahead of ourselves. Week 1, against number 3 Ohio State at Ohio State was a tall task for anybody, really, going against the defending champs on top of that. So again, I don't want to bash Arch Manning too much because of that compared to others. I think he was, compared to, if you looked on NFL, or football media, especially for college football, they give him high praise. Maybe higher than they should have. Being going a little too crazy with Arch Manning. But again, certainly it was no doubt a bad game. It was no doubt about that. It was a disappointing game for Arch Manning, also for Texas in general too, more so for the offensive side. But I do think Arch Manning will bounce back, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next few games. But again, they're not that difficult. San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston are going to be easy, gimme games. They'll build up chemistry. They'll put up high points. And then maybe to a point, I do worry that all of a sudden then the hype's going to go way too high because of the next 3 games. And then when we get to Florida, if he doesn't live up to it, then people are going to be crushed again. But again, I think he'll bounce back. I think he'll get back into a rhythm. And again, brutal loss, no question about that, week 1. But it's just one game. We'll see how he plays for the rest of the season. Again, I do think he will play well and have this team in position in a good spot in the college playoffs. And even then, that'll be another trial to see how Arch Manning does in that one. And then going over to the rest of college football, we had certainly plenty of upsets this past week, starting off with, not in particular order, but just what I wrote down here. Number 22, Iowa State over number 17, Kansas State 24-17. We had Florida State win over Boise State, number 25 in the country, 34-17. Of course, what we talked about, number 3 Ohio State over number 1 Texas. The biggest one, no question, which we'll probably talk about more about, is Florida State upsetting number 8 Alabama, 31-17. That was the biggest one at Florida State too. And there's really a lot of questions about what's going to happen with Alabama moving forward. Number 9 LSU taking down number 4 Clemson at Clemson, 17-10. Big win by Chip Kelly to open up the season. And also last night, number 10 Miami over number 6 Notre Dame, 27-24. Also true for the quarterback Carson Beck, having a great bounce back to start the season at his debut with Miami compared to last year, how it went with Georgia. And then going back to, like we said, for Alabama, it was absolutely brutal. Compared to all the upsets in this one, even with Arch Manning, this was, to me, no question for all of us, the biggest surprise. And you talk about, bashing a team or coach or whatever, all the hate that goes to them, that, maybe not so hate, that should be a little harsh, but certainly criticism, it's deserving for Alabama of what happened to them. This is a Florida team that was a 2-1 team last year, was absolutely brutal last year, horrible, no expectations coming in here per se, compared to, if you look at comparing the team to last year, and then go to Florida State, unranked team, you look at what they did last year, and to basically get blown out 31-17. Didn't watch the game, of course, but I saw some highlights, saw the lack of effort by some players, and it just shows you how far the standard has fallen in Alabama, especially since Nick Saban has left, not even 2 years ago, really, or at most 2 years ago, per se. And, especially for Kellen DeBoer, there is a lot of questions, no doubt about that. And you look at the rest of the schedule, it is tough, as well as, like I talked about for Texas. I mean, going to the next game, it's, again, Louisiana, Monroe for week 2. The rest of the stretch is Wisconsin, which also is certainly an easier game, no doubt. But after that is Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma. You had an easy game at the end, Eastern Illinois, and then wrap it up with Auburn, of course. But, boy, the expectations and the standard has dropped dramatically by Kellen DeBoer in his short stint so far with Alabama and how it's looked so far. You look at new starting quarterback Ty Simpson, who had to wait a few years to get his opportunity, went 23 of 43, 53.4 completion percentage, 254 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The running game was basically non-existent. Kevin Riley was your leading rusher, 5 carries for 31 yards. Absolutely nothing on that side of things. And receiving, the only one that really showed out was Grammy Bernard, 8 catches for 146 yards. After that, your second leading receiver was Josh Curvis with 31 yards receiving. And again, boy, what a disappointing start to the season it's been. And I don't know how far they're going to fall. I mean, they're number 8 right now in the top 25. Is it going to be the mid-teens or maybe even fall later, lower than that? I don't know, but again, you look at, especially compared to Nick Saban, it's not a fair comparison, of course, because of how great Nick Saban was and what he's done. But certainly they felt confident in Kellen DeBoer to kind of carry that legacy on. And thought initially I thought a great hire, a great transition. You saw what he did at Washington, especially his last year there, taking him all the way to the national championship game, blown out by Michigan, of course. But you look what he did with that program, and you thought this is a great step, a great transition to post Nick Saban. And thus far, it's been absolutely brutal, just to say, the very least to say. This is one stat that is insane to think about, and shows that the greatness of Nick Saban, also how horrible Kevin DeBoer and the program has been thus far, and not even full seasons. Nick Saban has coached 230 games at Alabama. He had 4 losses to unranked teams during that stretch. 230 games, only 4 unranked losses. Kevin DeBoer has coached 14 games at Alabama and has 4 losses to unranked opponents already. Only 14 games in, and we already have 4 unranked losses compared to Nick Saban for 230 games. That is the issue. That is the biggest problem there of that. And DeBoer is going to have a short leash. Alabama is not going to tolerate what is going on right now. You look at the season so far. It should be a gimme win. Louisiana Monroe. If they lose that game, he's out. No question. If that goes the worst case scenario and they lose week 2, he's gone. Even maybe potentially even like week 3, if they lose that one against Wisconsin, I mean, there's certainly it ramps up the conversation. But Alabama, he has to turn it around because it is fallen again. Why I keep saying over and over again, the standard has fallen drastically, and what I've seen from many people, what they've shown from what Nick Saban and how the players have acted and how they are. Not saying that they're horrible or anything, getting in trouble, but just the standard and how they approach things and how they act and so forth. And seen some videos and all like that. People always constantly say, like, Nick Saban would never allow this. He would never allow this to happen. The effort on the field, never allow it to happen, and so forth. And no question, if Nick Saban was the coach for Alabama in that game, they would not lost. They would have taken care of business, and it'd be business as usual for Alabama and what we consider them. So that is going to be very interesting to see what happens with DeBoer in that his short stint there. And again, I think he has a very short leash right now. There were certainly questions before going to Florida State how it was. I mean, they barely missed the playoffs last year, so it wasn't a horrible season, compared to other programs. But you look at his first year there, went 9-3 before the bowl game, of course, and some of the brutal losses was Vanderbilt, number 11 Tennessee at that point, Oklahoma unranked. That was, especially as a Sooners fan, that was shocking to see that. That was absolutely shocking to see how bad Alabama played in that one, only putting 3 points on the board, and then 9-4 to wrap up the season, losing to Michigan in the bowl game, 19-13. So I think at that point, barely missing the playoffs. There was certainly a lot of discussion in the last playoff spot. I think Alabama, South Carolina, and I think SMU. I think maybe then one other team that was kind of people kept juggling back and forth of who had the better resume, who was the better team to get in. SMU inevitably got in. Alabama and other teams falling short, and then again losing to the bowl game against Michigan to make things even worse, going 9-4 to wrap up the year. And again, there was some talk, no doubt about that. There was some smoke. I don't want to say he was, certainly people were harping for him to get fired, but there was certainly some conversations of like, hey, this isn't, necessarily the best season so far, or best start so far. I mean, to start off the year, it was great. I mean, they were 4-0. That's coming off of before the Vanderbilt loss. They beat number 2 Georgia, which was a huge statement one. No doubt about that. I mean, everything was going great up until that point, and then you lose to Vanderbilt. And then, 2 weeks later, you lose to Tennessee, and then you lose on top of that Oklahoma, who was absolutely brutal offensively last year. So, again, as a Sooners fan, they were horrible offensively. And the fact that Alabama just couldn't do anything in that game was, it's stuff like that. All the unranked losses thus far for matchup to Nick Saban in, if you do the math real quick, 216 last games. If I have that right, 230, 216 last games than Nick Saban. So there is, again, a lot of questions about Alabama and moving forward, how they're going to respond from this shocking loss to start off the year. Another one, too, Clemson was another one, not as brutal compared to Florida State, of course. You lose number 9, LSU, but certainly it is a little disappointing when you look at Chip Kelly, who has struggled to start off the season and struggle in big games like this. So again, on the flip side, congratulations to Chip Kelly. Really had a statement there, a staple game to really show people how what the LSU was like this year. It was very tough game as well, as similar to kind of Ohio State, Texas, very back and forth, a little bit more high scoring, tad bit. But again, great statement win by Chip Kelly. But on the flip side for Clemson, again had plenty of opportunities to Kate Klubnik. 19-38, 50% completion percentage, 230 yards, 1 interception. Another quarterback that is highly praised coming out into this upcoming draft. First round pick. A lot of people project him as high in some of them, and again, not a great start for his Clemson season as well as his draft stock too. On top of that, but again, Clemson I think they'll bounce back, but they've had trouble with lately with the SEC. So we'll see if Dabo Swinney can turn it around. I mean, no question they'll be a playoff team, so I'm not going to say that it's end of the world. They're going to fall apart now. they'll be just fine like Texas. They'll bounce back, but still a brutal loss to start the year outright. And then Miami, like I said, great game by Carson Beck compared to how it was last year. Definitely was a brutal season last year. One, again, high praise if he did opt into before this past draft. Highly projected first overall pick, at least high in the first round. And as the year went on, just kept falling on mock drafts. He made the right decision to come back this year, but decided to transfer elsewhere in Miami, and also had some off the field issues as well, problems too on top of that. And for him to come out and have a great game like he did was great. It was nice to see. And all right, people are having a high praise first round pick now. All of a sudden, I don't want to go too far into that, but definitely had a great start to his Miami Hurricanes debut and what he did on that one against Notre Dame. 205 yards, 67.7 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 0 receptions, a 114.7 QBR. Again, off to an impressive team now, the runner-ups in the national championship game of Notre Dame in that one. And then wrapping up here is just the winners and losers. And I know I talked about Sanders, and we'll get to that real quick as well. Winners, no doubt, Florida State, a massive win for that program that bounced back from a horrible season last year. Carson Beck, like I talked about, bouncing back in his debut with the Miami Hurricanes. Chip Kelly, I put LSU, but more specifically Chip Kelly to kind of get that monkey off his back with the last few years of losing in a heartbreak at the start of the season. So him going to Clemson, being number 4 Clemson there, was a huge staple win for him. And also, too, just for the fans. They have college football back. It was exciting. I know there were some disappointing games, of course, with Texas, Ohio State, and maybe a couple others, but we got the excitement. We got great catches, great highlight reels, and it's gotten great for all the fans that college football is finally back and up and running, and it's going to be a great few months to start off with, as well as if you're an NFL fan, too, on top of that. Losers, of course, we talk about Alabama, Kellen DeBoer. Need to turn the program around real quick this season, or else he's going to be out there. Arch Manning, again, let me talk about, I don't want to bash him too much, but certainly was a brutal start to his starting career with Texas there. And as well as Deion Sanders, going back to kind of the big loss. Now, these weren't ranked games by either team, but still, the fact that he lost in his first game post Shedeur Sanders, and also Travis Hunter too, especially still getting criticized for the time management, especially for the final drive over, I think it was 1:07 left in the game, 2 timeouts, and just mismanaged that, took no timeouts, wasted time on the clock, and didn't give himself an opportunity to score when Georgia Tech scored pretty too fast, gave him over a minute left in the game, 2 timeouts. I mean, for any team, that's great management. That's great opportunity to tie the game and bounce back. For Deion Sanders, why the timeouts weren't taken, I don't know why. But again, certainly getting a huge bash. Certainly people criticizing him harshly for that and what he's going to do. And it's going to be interesting to see what Colorado does for the rest of the year in that circumstance. I mean, defense looked brutal in that one. You have Haynes King, who threw for 143 yards, an interception, but more importantly had 19 carries for 156 yards and three touchdowns. Absolutely brutal. Could not contain him at all in the running game whatsoever in that regard. You look at his starter, Cadence Slater from Liberty, 17 to 28, 60% completion percentage, 159 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 receptions, 92.7 QBR. The running game was okay at best. I mean, you have Michael Welch, 11 carries, 64 yards. You had Cadence Slater, the quarterback himself, 43 rushing yards and a touchdown. And for receiving yards, too, nothing too crazy whatsoever. I mean, you had Amarian Miller with 1 catch for 39 yards. He was your leading receiver. After that, you had DeKalon Taylor, if I said his name right, 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown, and the only touchdown in the game receiving wise. So again, not a rough start for Colorado thus far. Post Shedeur Sanders, and more importantly, the Travis Hunter, certainly the Heisman winner in that regard. Looking at the rest of the season for them real quick, they have next Delaware, then it's Houston, Wyoming, BYU, TCU, number 22 Iowa State, Utah, Arizona, West Virginia, number 11 Arizona State, and then wrap up the season with number 17 Kansas State. Again, the rankings are going to be different at that point, but just looking at it right now. And it's going to be very interesting to see, because if it's not a good season, if it's a rough one, I'm not saying that the Colorado's going to fire him, because they're not, because they've had the biggest success they've had in a long time, which with Deion Sanders and what he's brought to the table, the revenue, the money, the spotlight. So I'm not saying he's going to get fired. I'm not saying that whatsoever. That's not on the table. But certainly there's more questions about Sanders the coach? Is he actually a good coach? Was it more just the players like Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders that kind of carried him a little bit? It's going to be very interesting to see how that storyline's going to come, because Sanders is very polarizing to begin with. People will immediately bash him, brutally in losses, and then the high praise when he wins. So it's very bipolar in terms of the wins and losses, of how he gets scrutinized in that one or praised. So it's going to get very interesting how it plays out post Shedeur Sanders, especially at the quarterback, because Shedeur has been his quarterback for forever at high school, college, at Jackson State, coming to Colorado. So it's gonna be very interesting to see how it plays out, with at the quarterback position there, and how Deion Sanders overall success wise does this year. I mean, it should be an easy game next week with Delaware. After that, it's a little bit iffy with Houston, BYU, Iowa State. There is some tough teams ahead. So it's gonna be very interesting to see if Deion could get this team to be bowl eligible and how they play out. But again, going back to quick for losers, Deion Sanders in that one for the time management and the shocking loss to Georgia Tech. And it's going to wrap it up for episode 4 for this one. Again, very quick, really just one topic, kind of bringing down multiple, really, for more Arch Manning, giving it his spotlight, or his separate talk with that one, and more so just week 1 overall with some of the upsets. But again, very excited to see college football is back. Exciting, no doubt about that. Even if there was upsets and disappointing games and so forth, exciting to see that. Can't wait for the next few months to see how things play out, and also to wrapping up pretty soon, less than a week from now, with the start of the NFL season. So take care. We'll see you in the next one.